Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and thank you for allowing me to make a delivery here on this very important topic of Bitcoin and Islam. The topic of my discussion today is Bitcoin through an Islamic lens. Now, Muslims throughout their lives always seek to find guidance from Islam in all avenues and facets of their life. As one of the narrations or one of the Islamic texts mentions that one of the companions of the Messenger of Allah said, Islam or Prophet Muhammad has not left anything except that he has mentioned some benefit or some guidance, even to the point of how one must use the toilet or the bathroom in a clean manner. So you find that Muslims will always seek the Islamic guidance in all avenues and facets of their life. And Bitcoin is no different. Bitcoin is new in the sense that we haven't had a monetary system that behaves exactly like Bitcoin. But in that being new, that doesn't mean that Islam doesn't have anything to say about Bitcoin, or that Islam is unable to address the topic of Bitcoin. On the contrary, Muslims are very confident that Islam will always have something to say about about various aspects of their life, even if it is, or it may perceive to be or seem to be, new and novel. But before we discuss this topic, as Muslims, we love to understand who are we taking our knowledge from. And without any delay, we'd like to introduce the speaker today, which is myself. My name is Muawwiyah Tucker, and I was born and raised a Christian and accepted Islam in 1998. So I was in college and I was introduced to Islam, and after many months of research into Islam, the Quran, and so on and so forth, I eventually took my Shahada, became Muslim in college at the age of 18, and I've been Muslim ever since. And about a year and a bit after I became Muslim, Allah blessed me with the opportunity to go and study in the Islamic University of Medinah, studying Arabic language for 3 years, and then studying Islamic law for 4 years. And in that degree, we covered things like Islamic economics, judicial system, and so on and so forth. And after graduating, I returned to the UK, where I established an Islamic institute teaching Arabic and Islamic studies to both adults and children, and we do so until this day. And during that time, in about 2016, I was introduced, ironically, to Bitcoin from Jazeera. Jazeera News, the well-known news network, I think it was in Qatar, and they had a little video about what Bitcoin was, and it intrigued me about Bitcoin because I was very unhappy with the current monetary system, being it the fact it's based upon interest. At the time, I wasn't aware of how deep interest was, or riba was, in the system. But once I delved down the rabbit hole, I haven't left that hole ever since. And I've been pretty much learning about Bitcoin and teaching about it since 2016, or mainly 2017. So back to the issue of our topic, and that is, why does Islam have to say anything about Bitcoin? This is very important to understand for a Muslim. When it comes to Islamic guidance, the question is, Islam be even involved or join this discussion or topic? It comes down to a very simple premise. The first one is that Islam was the final, or is, I should say, the final revelation given to mankind. That is very important to understand. It's the final revelation and guidance to mankind, meaning there's not going to be any other prophet after Prophet Muhammad sent to mankind. That means that what he has delivered has to be all encompassing for all aspects of life, both in his time and in the future. And also, Islam needs to be able to cope with novel ideas. You can't be the final revelation that is applicable to the end of time unless this religion is able to cope with new ideas. And therefore, we should find within the Sharia of Islam clear answers towards Bitcoin. You know, how should we treat Bitcoin? How should we interact with Bitcoin? What can we do and what can we not do? Is it good for mankind, or is it ultimately harmful? So the question is, what does um, Islam have to say about Bitcoin? Well, I should say about money and economics. As before we talk about Bitcoin, what does Islam have to say about money and economics? So we as Muslims believe, and which is a proven fact, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu gave or delivered Islam over the period of 23 years. 23 years, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu he was a father, he was a husband, he was You could say he was a trader, he was a farmer, he was a leader, he was a general. He embodied almost every aspect of human living, and from that we take guidance from in every aspect of our living and our lives. So this is why it's not a surprise that Islam has detailed rules and regulations as it relates to money and economy. So, what are the primary objectives of trade in Al-Islam? This is where we start laying the foundations to understand Bitcoin from an Islamic perspective through an Islamic lens. The first of the many primary directives, or you could say principles of trade in Islam, is that wealth cannot be destroyed. Meaning that if someone has established wealth by Islamic law, and Islam or the Islamic system acknowledges that they are the owners of that wealth, it should by necessity preserve that wealth. Also, that trade between individuals, as you exchange that wealth between people, it must be fair and not zero sum, meaning that there shouldn't be a case where someone is being ripped off, or whereby the trade is only one sided, or whereby, nor do we have Muslims have a belief that you can have trade which is zero sum, meaning that in order for someone to win, someone must lose. Actually, what we believe is that if you're going to do a trade and the trade is allowed, it should be a fair trade where both parties are benefiting. Also, trades must be clear and concise, as you cannot have ambiguity in trade. So any transaction you find ambiguity where we don't know what the product is, how much the product is, what's the cost of the product, if there's any ambiguity in that trade, Islam strictly prohibits those sorts of trades. Also, in Islamic take, or the Islamic view of trade, that is must be free from riba, free from what we call interest. Now, riba is a loose translation of interest, because not all interest is riba, not all riba is interest, but loosely taken is that riba is interest, where you lend money to someone and you get back profits on your loan. So all transactions must be devoid of riba. And finally, that money can only exchange hands for a due right, meaning that if I was to give money to someone else or receive money from someone else, it must be for a valid reason. If the reason is invalid, then the transaction must be undone. So these are, you could say, are some of the fundamental principles underpinning Islamic trade and finance, well, not finance, but Islamic trade and economy and business, as dictated by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as instructed to us by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Allah Azza wa Jal. So how does Bitcoin, fulfill those objectives? Well, first and foremost, if you look at the issue of wealth not being destroyed, we have a secure ledger. Bitcoin is very unique in that we have information. That's all it is. Bitcoin is information, and it is secured in a manner which we've never seen before in human history. Securing information has been done through paper, through memorization even. There's many ways in which mankind has chosen to secure and record data, but we never had a way it's so secure as we see with Bitcoin. So it fulfills the first premise in terms of not destroying wealth. The second issue is that the trade must be fair, not zero sum. So we find that Bitcoin has solved the issue of double spend. So it basically means that when I give my Bitcoin to someone else, I no longer have it. I can't spend that Bitcoin twice. It solves that problem. And also, more importantly, in our discussion, as we compare Bitcoin to fiat, is that Bitcoin can only be issued, can only come into existence through hard work and labor. So if anyone was to earn Bitcoin through mining, it will be because they have invested time and effort to earn those Bitcoin. Also, details of the trade must be clear. So we find that Bitcoin also fulfills that role by being an open and transparent ledger. Anyone can view a transaction on a blockchain, and everyone can have their own copy of the blockchain, so they can verify things themselves independently. So we can trace the flow of money from wallet to wallet quite transparently, and that makes transactions, or that aids towards transactions being clear and known. Also, we find that Bitcoin is free of riba. Actually, fiat money comes into existence and is built upon the foundation of riba, of interest, whereas Bitcoin is built upon the foundation of hard work and labor. And finally, when it comes to money it has to be exchanged for due right. Again, we have, mashallah, the Bitcoin, as your Bitcoin is stored on a random number called a private key. And this private key gives permission to whoever owns that private key to exchange that helps to secure your wealth from being sent or even received without permission of the owner of those keys. So it helps maintain or aids towards maintaining the exchange of wealth only through a due right. Now it obviously doesn't solve the issue of why. I mean, if someone wants to use Bitcoin for the buying or selling of drugs, that's not a due right. Doesn't solve that problem, but at least it solves the problem of coercion or confiscation. So these core values of Islamic business and economics is fulfilled with Bitcoin. So again, we looked at how it fulfills these core values of as we previously mentioned with Bitcoin. Also, we find that it is better than fiat. When we say fiat, we mean the money that is printed by governments, because government money, because the government has the permission to print money, that inadvertently allows the government to earn or make money without any effort exerted. Also allows the government to confiscate the wealth of the people by this money printing or by inducing inflation, because inflation is the printing of money. And we also get the benefits from Bitcoin that we get with gold, as in gold can only come into existence through hard work and labor. Likewise, Bitcoin can only come into existence through hard work and labor. Gold, if you gave it to someone else, you no longer have it. It solves the double spend issue. So we get all the benefits of gold in Bitcoin, but also we get extra benefits that gold doesn't have. So the ability to transact over long distances with near instant finalization of transactions. And also we get the ease of transportation because it has no weight. Bitcoin is weightless. It's just information. So we get many more benefits that doesn't come with gold, or you can say maybe the hindrances that come with gold is resolved with Bitcoin. So the question is then, why the hate? Why so many people are against Bitcoin? We have many fatwa, many people speak against Bitcoin. Why is that case? And it comes literally down to a simple thing of false information or incorrect understanding. Very important. False information or incorrect understanding. These two things, if you look at it, it helps you understand why we have so many people who are negative towards Bitcoin, and helps us also understand in a compassionate way not to be so harsh on those individuals, because if they've been misinformed, then it's not their fault, they've been misinformed. Or if they've misunderstood something, again, all it requires is then for them is for those individuals to educate themselves further on how Bitcoin works, what it is, so they can issue more accurate Islamic rulings. So let's look at some of the reasons why people are against Bitcoin. And to be honest, it all comes down to you find that these it's something you'd find of all new technology. All money is just technology, whether it's rare metals, pieces of metal, so rare materials, pieces of metals, minted coins, pieces of paper, the current riba-backed system or Bitcoin. These are all new technologies, and at every transition you'll find there's always a stage whereby the people need to understand, digest the information in order for them to give accurate information. So let's name some of the reasons why, or the objections why Bitcoin is halal is in the eyes of some. The first example, which is often mentioned, is that Bitcoin isn't issued by a government body. Bitcoin is not tangible, so something physical you can touch. Some made the objection that Bitcoin was created by unknown parties. We don't know who this individual was, who's Satoshi Nakamoto, or who are these miners. Some say that because Bitcoin is not gold or silver, they have objections towards it being not gold or silver. Or the very common one is to do with the price stability. They see Bitcoin. Last time they checked, Bitcoin was at 5,000. Now they're checking it's at 10,000, 50,000, and then next week they check it's back down to 30 again. It looks confusing. It looks horrific sometimes. And but also finally, which is a very new one, that Bitcoin is a waste of energy. So let's address these very briefly one by one. The first one is to do with the government body. Now, this one, a lot of these things are about framing. How do you frame this objection? Now, issuing or having money issued by a known source, i.e. the government, this is very important because it gives reliability, it gives confidence to the money you're using. If it's going to be money you're using over the whole nation, no doubt confidence is very important. Reliability is very important. And therefore, Bitcoin not being issued by government is definitely an issue. But what do you do when you can no longer trust those people who are issuing the money? Now, like I said, if it was a case whereby we had governments who actually issued money and kept the money supply as it should be, either stable or not, and didn't manipulate it for their own personal gains, then maybe the case of Bitcoin might not even be there, because we already have a system that works, probably even works better than Bitcoin if it was in terms of speed and whatnot. But what do you do when we have constantly, over and over again, us being failed by our current systems? What we have to do, we have to have a system somehow that doesn't require individuals, and this is what we have with Bitcoin. So it's not that being, that the issue of government is necessarily a bad thing. It could be a good thing. It just so happens that human beings are not very good at managing money supply, and we've seen centuries of confirmed events whereby mankind has inflated and diluted their money supply and have ultimately harmed the nation. So what we have now is a system that actually doesn't need government intervention. Actually, it transcends the need for them. And actually, in this context, government not being involved is actually a good thing. Next one is the issue of tangibility. Again, how do you frame this topic? So this is an example of skeuomorphism. Skeuomorphism is like when you have something, you have your current technology, and when you have new technology come along, you view the new technology in the mindset of the old. So tangibility is very important because that's how you confirm ownership. If I have a gold coin in my hand and then someone was to dispute and say that coin is theirs, an Islamic judge will look at who has it in their hand, it's me, and will work from there. Because he has it in his hand, we know, at least from the obvious, it's his. Now the other guy needs to bring evidence that it's his instead, through evidence. And we have this basis in Islamic law through tangibility. Whose hand is it in? Now Bitcoin, I can't grab it. So there's that conflict. How do you deal with this thing which is not tangible? So again, we have this, we know how it should be from our current system. Now it's something new, and it just needs time to adjust. So this idea of tangibility is mainly for verifiability and for security of the thing. Whereas again, digital scarcity as well, which is basically something which is information, essentially digital basically means information, was never really scarce until Bitcoin. Before Bitcoin, you can copy and paste as much as you like. There was never end of copy and pasting. But now we actually have digital scarcity, rarity in the digital realm. And that's something we've never had before, which is why you can understand why it's difficult to comprehend sometimes. It takes time for that information to settle in the mind. Again, so now we actually have digital scarcity. The issue of Bitcoin being anonymous parties, again, we would need to know who Satoshi Nakamoto is, or who these miners were, if their personality, who they were, their reliability was necessary. So look at old systems, even minting coins. If I said this coin was X amount or made from pure gold, we might need to either verify that independently, which takes a lot of time, or trust someone. So knowing who Satoshi is or who miners are makes sense in that frame. But because it's based on mathematics, it's independently verifiable and unforgeable. So therefore, who Satoshi is or who miners are is irrelevant because it is secured with mathematics. Satoshi, who he is unimportant. We have the code. We can analyze the code, look at the code ourselves. Not to mention that Bitcoin has actually been updated since then, so it's not the same that Satoshi made. And also, in terms of miners, again, who they were, who they are, is not important. Actually, it's better that they remain anonymous so that they can't be coerced. So the miners can't be coerced into breaking or manipulating the system. Why is Bitcoin not like gold and silver, or Bitcoin isn't gold and silver? That's the objection. Again, that's not really a big objection because there's nothing. I mean, fiat currency, number one, is not gold or silver. So that's, if you accept fiat currency but don't accept Bitcoin, that's a bit hypocrisy. But also, there's no evidence from the Quran or Sunnah that requires Bitcoin to be so it requires money to be gold or silver. It was mentioned gold and silver, zakat and gold and silver, but there's nothing stipulating that if it's not gold and silver, one is sinful. And you can exchange anything for goods and services: gold, silver, diamonds, a car, anything you can. As long as they want your customer or the one you're doing business with wants it, and he's going to take it from you, then that's good enough. The stability in the price. Now, the stability in price has never been a condition for money, because we see at the time in the Message of Allah, there was even inflation then, meaning that things increased in price and decreased in price. So that doesn't necessarily mean that because things increase or decrease in price, therefore it's no longer good as money. In fact, stability in money is actually quite a new phenomena due to mankind trying to manually massage the value of money and make it stable. But historically, it's not been the case. Um, yes, historically, it's not been the case. We had this example of inflation in time, Messenger of Allah. And also, more importantly, those who make that objection, they have a bit of double standards. We have a bit of double standards because you find, for example, in most countries there's inflation. So let's take, for example, as we're talking in Indonesia, let's look at the Indonesian rupiah. It lost 80% of its purchasing power just between 1997 and 98 when I became Muslim. 80% was lost during that time. Then it gained 158% the year after that. And then it halved again in value the following 2 years. And then it gained 50% in the next 2 years. And then it bounced around between 50% and so on and so forth until now. And since 1997 till now, it's about net 81% down from its previous price. So if we were to say volatility in price is an issue and doesn't make something money, then why is that not applied also to fiat money? That's the main answer to that one. And finally, with the issue of energy, it's a waste of energy. This is a simple one because I think at the end of the day, it's down to how you frame the situation. This is only as in the money, the energy spent securing a Bitcoin network only makes sense when you factor in what Bitcoin is actually doing. And Bitcoin is securing the monetary network for the whole of mankind. So that's justifies the energy loss. So how does one acquire Bitcoin? Islamically, halal. Very simply, you just the same way you would acquire gold and silver through transactions, buying or selling or whatnot, or acquiring or earning it, as in doing work and actually earning it. So like I said, you can do it via various different avenues. Like I mentioned before, you can earn the Bitcoin as you get paid. It's probably one of the best ways to earn Bitcoin through exchanging money. So you have money in one currency and you exchange for Bitcoin and so on and so forth. It's called sarf in Arabic language. Like you could change gold for silver. It's called sarf. Mining Bitcoin, just like you can mine gold, you can actually buy a rig or a computer and you can start mining your own Bitcoin. And there are many different ways in which you can earn Bitcoin, just like you would earn gold and silver. Also, besides that, there are many ways you can earn Bitcoin, which is haram. Also, you can earn Bitcoin, do margin trading, futures trading, gambling, theft. You can do that, or for riba loans or CFDs. These are all very different, various ways in which you can earn Bitcoin in a haram way. So we can see that haram, you can earn Bitcoin through haram, but Bitcoin itself is not intrinsically haram. And the question I guess you can say we conclude on is, should one invest in Bitcoin? I like to say that the question suggests that we focus on the words and missing the message. It's not that one should get Bitcoin to get more fiat. One should get Bitcoin because it is the future of money. Bitcoin is money and it is a store of wealth, and this is something we should need to focus on when looking at Bitcoin. It's not just a thing you speculate on to get more fiat, because at the end of the day, fiat is going to die. Confirmed. It's always died throughout history, and there's no reason to suggest that fiat today would be any different from all fiat in the past. And we should think of Bitcoin and consider it as a means to preserve our wealth for future, especially against the coming inflation, which is on its way, guaranteed. And we should think about it as an opportunity to get Bitcoin while it's still cheap. Because at the moment, we might see it's very expensive, but in 5 years' time, we will say, wow, Bitcoin was cheap at 65,000. Anyway, so hopefully you've learned what you need to learn from Bitcoin. Hopefully I was able to answer some of your queries or some of the things you may be concerned about. And we ask Allah to bless all of you and give you plenty Bitcoin. Jazakallah khair for all your time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Okay, we are live now. Thank you, Lucas. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so Thank you. Assalamualaikum Muawwiyah. Thank you for
Walaikum salam
coming.
to Thanks for hosting me, for having me.
Yeah, sorry for the technical difficulties, and for everyone, we will definitely upload this video later so you can understand more from Muawwiyah presentation. But we have some question already posted in here, and let me just pull it out. So this topic right now today that we have is quite really interesting because just few days ago, an Islamic organization in Indonesia just issued a fatwa that cryptocurrency is haram. And the main reason is because it is contains like an element of speculation. So what do you think? This is one of the questions from the attendants.
Okay, Bismillah wa salatu wasalam ala Rasulillah. So the issue, the problem I have personally with this fatwa and fatwa like it is it's so generic and general that it's not very applicable. Let me explain what I mean by that. If I say cryptocurrencies is speculative, but we already know in this space there's a wide range of cryptocurrencies. They got Shiba Inu on one spectrum, and you got Bitcoin on the other spectrum. And there's a strong case to be made that, to be honest, the only real candidate that has real benefit is Bitcoin. So if you want to include Bitcoin with all the other coins, I think that's an injustice. It's totally not fair. And this is why I think that such fatwa seems ill-researched, because even when people ask me about cryptocurrencies, I can't give a generic answer because they're so different. It's like stocks, it's like products, like items. You can't say, for example, all drinks are haram because you can get some drinks you get drunk from. I mean, some drinks you can't, and some drinks are necessary. I mean, you can't make a generic rule from that. So what will be more useful to the Muslim Ummah is to give guidelines as to what constitutes haram behavior, and what one should look out for when seeking investment, because that's another issue as well. Most people are into this crypto space, especially right now during this bull market, for income, or they want to generate revenue, they want to generate more fiat, basically. Most people. Well, I can't say most, I don't know everyone, but a lot of people they just want more fiat, and they think that cryptocurrency is a way to quickly flip a coin and make more money from it. So what would be better, I believe, and more accurate, would be to say, if a person wishes to purchase a coin, having no idea what the coin offers, what the coin does, what the coin is, if it's even a real project, but only have one interest in just buying it now and flipping it 2 hours later, 5 hours later, trying to make a quick buck, and essentially behaving like a gambler at the casino, throwing money at the table, then yeah, you say that behavior is irresponsible and similar to how a gambler behaves. Thing is, we can't call it gambling because gambling is zero sum. You bet on an event, you either win what you want to win or you lose everything. Whereas in this case here, you are buying something and you hold that thing and it is yours forever. Even if that coin is worth nothing in the end, you still have it. It's still yours. It's like going to the supermarket and buying a loaf of bread. I could buy the loaf of bread and turn out the loaf of bread is off and useless now, but I still have a loaf of bread. So so I think it's more useful to focus on the behaviors of people in the markets rather than generically all cryptocurrencies are haram. But back to the issue of speculation, just to be brief. Speculation, this now, again, it focuses more on intention rather than the thing. And this is what I want people to understand, is that when they look at these fatwa, it doesn't seem like they're talking about the actual cryptocurrencies. Like we would say pork is haram. We're talking about pork, consuming the actual thing. Whereas if I talk about gambling, that's an action. That's not a thing. I can't grab gambling and say this is, and I've got it and I own it. It's now a behavior. So that's basically what I would take from that fatwa, is don't be a gambler. If you look at it from that perspective, don't be a gambler. Then we all say that. I mean, I'm sure everyone in this space says the exact same thing. Don't throw your money away. You always say don't buy all these throw your money away in these casinos of shitcoins. That's what they say. So, you know, that's how I see it. But as for saying that Bitcoin specifically is haram, it is what it is. I can't hear you.
Actually, we invite the people from the who also announced the fatwa to attend this Indonesia Bitcoin Conference to learn from you, Muawwiyah, to understand more. And I think the biggest challenge for everyone in the space, not only just like in the Islam perspective, but also in general, is just education. And that's why like the event, such things like Indonesia Bitcoin Conference is very important. And we have another question from, it's almost similar. So another things that really famous in the Bitcoin space is staking and yield farming, right? A lot of people want to put their Bitcoin into staking and then earn some kind of interest. And do you think this is halal, or what do you think is allowed in Islam?
Yeah, so it's important, very, very, very important to separate things into its necessary compartments. So when we're discussing Bitcoin, possessing it, acquiring it, spending it, that's a discussion, and we've established that that's halal. Then the next question is, okay, how can I make my Bitcoin essentially work for me? I guess I could say, as in, how can I generate more income from the Bitcoin on top of the fact that Bitcoin is already generating or going up, as they say, number go up, as they say. So the issue of staking is a wide topic. And the reason why I say it's a wide topic, because they will say there's 3 types or 3 things you must look at, or 3 ways in which staking can occur. Number 1, it could be a reward system whereby a company or a project mints their own coins out of thin air and then promises to give you these coins if you do a certain act. That's one type of staking. And this usually occurs with a lot of these tokenized coins, as in it costs them nothing to issue, well, not nothing, almost nothing, near to nothing, to issue a smart contract to mint new coins. So it costs them nothing to have these coins. And basically they say, if you do X, Y, Z, you get rewarded. So like in UK, we have in shopping centers or supermarkets, if you shop at a supermarket, they'll give you points. And if you build up these points, you can spend these points in other things. So same kind of thing, like we have Tesco points or Asda points or not. So yeah, they're incentivizing further spending on their platform by giving you these free tokens. Now, in Tesco tokens or these other tokens, they're not really crypto tokens, but essentially that's how they behave the same way. And it costs them nothing to give you these points. So that kind of staking is fine. It's just giving you free stuff. Another type of staking is where you are providing liquidity to a pool where they use your money to do business, normally on decentralized exchanges. So that becomes like sarf. Like imagine I gave you, and the way it's important to know how to frame the situation. So if I said to you, look, I'm going Hajj is coming soon. I'm going to go to Hajj. I'm going to take a large wad of money. I'm going to take Iranian riyals, Indonesian rupiah, Saudi riyals, pound, dollars, and I'm just going to go to Hajj and do money exchange. I'm going to go there and just money exchange. All these Hajjaj come all over the world, they're going to need to have Saudi riyals when they come, and they're going to sell back out when they leave. So I'm going to use the opportunity to do money exchange. But I need some capital to do this. Can you give me some money and I'll buy these other currencies and I'll do some business and I'll give you a cut of the profits? That's essentially what liquidity pools are doing. They're taking your money, allowing money exchange, and giving you a cut of the proceeds. And in that, you could lose some money, as in the trade could go in a negative, and you could make some money, trade can go in a positive, and you end up getting your net income. Again, that type of staking, if you want to call that staking, is also halal. It's basically it's like mudaraba. You give money to someone and they do business with that and they bring you back returns. So those 2 types of staking is fine. The third type of staking, which one needs to be aware of, and most likely is haram, is when they are giving you a token. So you stake your money on a platform and they give you as a reward a certain token that they don't own. So they might say, if you stake your Bitcoin, we will give you more Bitcoin. Now, as you know, Bitcoin can only be mined. So that means unless these guys are miners, where's the Bitcoin coming from? If the Bitcoin is coming through interest-bearing loans, which is most likely the case in most cases. They will take your money and they'll issue loans to people who want to do margin trade, not leverage trade. And when they get back the Bitcoin they lent out with profits, they'll give you a cut of the profits. That specific sort of situation is haram, because essentially they're using your money to do riba and to engage in a riba transaction, and therefore you are partaking in that riba transaction. And any other type form of staking where they use your money to generate haram income, whether it be through gambling, they can use your money to run a casino. If you're giving your money to them and they're using your money to perform haram acts, that form of staking is haram. So just focus on those three ways. Number one, issuing of a token and just made it out of thin air. To cost them nothing to give you these free tokens, take it. You're providing liquidity to a liquidity pool where they allow exchanges of currencies. And finally, where you loan them their money and they use your money for haram activities, that form of staking is haram. Oh, and one last thing. So also in terms of staking and things like Ethereum and Cardano, they behave like the first one, because although Ethereum is technically a cryptocurrency, it is still issued when they mint a new block. So it's the same kind of thing.
So I think we are almost at the end of the session, and we have a really, really good question. This is from Mumtaz Humam, and he said, Ustadz, I love you for the sake of Allah. He wants to translate your fatwa about Bitcoin to his channel. So yeah, maybe later you guys can exchange contact. But he said, like, if you can say in just like short 1 minute, how to explain Bitcoin is halal.
So that's probably the hardest question of all. I mean, just to give you a background why it's so hard. I mean, I think I can't really give you a definitive 1 minute answer how to explain Bitcoin is halal in 1 minute. But what I can do is maybe highlight why it's hard to explain. Bitcoin is essentially gold, but on the blockchain. So all the properties of gold and silver exist with Bitcoin. The only hurdle we now have to do is, or get over, is how do you conceptually detach gold from reality? Meaning Bitcoin is not tangible. I can't grab the thing. So that's when people get that block. But how is Bitcoin like gold? I can't grab it. But you can grab it. That's the thing. You can grab your Bitcoin by taking control of your private keys. There's a different form of grabbing. I can hold gold and prove it's mine by having the gold in my hand. Whereas I can prove this Bitcoin is mine by having the private keys in my possession. So if you can get beyond the idea of physicality and holding the actual thing, it should help you in understanding how Bitcoin is essentially gold. Much like, for example, a book. You might have a physical book in your hand, but maybe you can memorize the book. And now you have the book in your head. If someone said to you, prove that you have the book, I can recite it back to you from memory. That's proof of my work. You can say that's my proof of work, that I have the book and I possess the book. The only difference is, though, in conclusion, is that with Bitcoin is information, much like the book is information, but it's the first time in human history we've had information that has scarcity. They can actually be only a limited supply of that information, and you can actually prove ownership and possession of that information. That's essentially, in a broader sense, what is halal.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Muawwiyah, for, even though it's like really short quiz question and answer, but I'm sure that from the video, everyone will get more deeper understanding. Please make sure to watch Muawwiyah channel, Crypto Hash Review, for more information. Yeah. So yeah, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Yeah. Take care,
Muawwiyah, I think you can leave.